We're going to go through the entire NFC, starting with the NFC East and the Dallas Cowboys, Sam. I think universally across PFF, it was one of our favorite drafts. And I think when you're evaluating drafts, people, drink every time you say value, right? It's you'll be quite drunk. But I think you look at value plays. Where did you get this player compared to where he was either on our board or just in general? And I think Dallas did a really nice job of that. Also, the fact that they let the board kind of come to them. And I also love when you don't just go fill out your depth chart. You don't just fill needs across the board. If the Cowboys had just grabbed Cesar Ruiz in the first round and filled their starting center spot instead of grabbing maybe the best wide receiver in the draft, that would have been a huge mistake. But instead, they let the board fall to them. They start with CeeDee Lamb, one of our favorite picks in the draft at 17.
This draft was absurd. PFF pulled out our mock draft simulator before the draft, a tool that everybody loved using. And one of the criticisms of a mock draft simulator is your sim's broken. This guy will never be available at this spot. If you put this draft through a simulator and showed it at the end, people would be like, your sim sucks. There's no way these guys are available at the spot that they were picked. Dallas had that basically all the way down the draft. CeeDee Lamb at 17, nobody thought he'd be available there. Trevon Diggs was mooted as a pick at 17. They get him a round later at 51. Neville Gallimore at 82 is like a full round lower than most people had him. All the way down, Reggie Robinson was one of those quiet steals of the draft type that everybody was on before. Biadasz in the 4th, Bradley Anae in the 5th. Like, this draft was absolutely absurd. If you were cherry picking, drafts for Team X before and trying to sort of find the most, vaguely plausible pick possible, but probably not going to work out, you couldn't have ended up much better than this Dallas draft. It was absolutely absurd. I think by far the best draft of the entire NFL.
Yeah, and the other thing about evaluating drafts, and we'll talk about this with the Eagles, is you're not just drafting for this year, you're also thinking going forward, right? The Trevon Diggs pick, I've said quite a bit during draft season that the Cowboys have 4/5 of their secondary with their contract up at the end of the year. Having Trevon Diggs, I don't know if he's going to step in and be an impact player right away, but we did have him as fringe first-round value. You get him at 51, but it's also a long-term play with all of those corners and safeties. Essentially have it being in the last year of their contract. So Diggs is a good fit there. The CeeDee Lamb move, that is something we absolutely would do. Actively try to get to 3 and 4 deep on your wide receiver core with various skill sets. You have Amari Cooper, one of the best route runners in the NFL. You have Michael Gallup, who just really emerged. We loved his. I mean, they're all three of them are good route runners. I wouldn't even say these are 3 different skill sets. They're all just good receivers. It's not like they have a 6'4" guy and a 5'8" guy and a yak guy. It's really just 3 good receivers. CeeDee Lamb is excellent with the ball in his hands, probably better than the other 2. Very good. I mean, they're going to run power sweep with him, the entire time, Sam. That's what they're going to do. But great after the catch feel, and having 3 wide receivers for a high volume passing attack, like, that's a must in today's NFL. I love this.
Yeah, and I think, it would have been interesting to see what they would have done had CeeDee Lamb had the fall not started from the wide receivers. Would they have taken Cesar Ruiz? A lot of people were saying, would they have gone corner and taken, Trevon Diggs that high?
They might have taken Diggs. Yeah.
Right. Either way, they reached the point where I think something that nobody ever saw coming in this draft happened and fell into their laps, and they just tossed out whatever their original plan had been and said, we're taking CeeDee Lamb here and we'll figure out what happens lower down the draft. We'll wait to see how it falls. And I think that's absolutely the right thing to do. We talked before, I did not see any conceivable way CeeDee Lamb fell beyond 12. I thought if he made it as far as the Raiders, they would be immediately up to take that pick. And instead they went with Ruggs. So Lamb fell to the Cowboys in a way I don't think anybody thought possible before the draft. And it's like, it's Christmas for them. That if they did nothing else, if all the other picks had been average or crappy, it would have been a solid move, because that first round is just a case of taking, don't look the gift horse in the mouth, take what they give you. And what they're giving you is arguably the best receiver in this class.
This is why teams use the horizontal board, right? The horizontal board, you put all the positions left to right, and then vertically you have where would you draft them from, like, a round standpoint, which is different from a draft board, which is, 1 through 200, 253, whatever the number is, right? CeeDee Lamb was probably sitting there at 17, and they were like, this is the last guy that we have with, say, a top 10 grade or whatever that cutoff was for them, right? We have 5 guys that we would take middle of the first or whatever that the next, tier is.
Right.
But there was probably one player left in that top tier. And again, that's where the smartest teams go. This was Derwin James a couple years ago by the Chargers. This is CeeDee Lamb now. You take the top 10 guy. And this also shows, I think, the benefit of not going into the draft with major needs. I think a team like the Bucs, who we'll talk about, went in with very specific needs that they had to fill, in part because they're working with an 80-year-old quarterback. But the Cowboys didn't have, I didn't have to get a safety. I didn't have to get a defensive tackle. They could take the best player from a value standpoint on their board, and that's where CeeDee Lamb comes in.
I mean, I think you could argue that they did have those needs at cornerback and at center, and usually the Cowboys are a team that's okay with that, right? They're okay rolling into the draft with a couple of needs, one or two big needs that they want to fill with a day one starter, and they take that guy in the first round and they never look back. But what's interesting is I think they potentially did that this year and said, you know what? This is too good a value it overrides that. I would like to fix corner. We're going to hope the corner is still there in the second round, but we can pass up CeeDee Lamb. They're subscribing to that, the Browns list of adages, never pass on a blue. They had a blue fall to them. The blue chip prospect fell to them. They didn't expect it to happen. So they didn't pass. They took him and, rode their luck a little bit. The corner would still be a position they could fix in the second round. And not only did they fix it, or at least, draft a second round corner, but it was a guy that a lot of people were meshing with Dallas in the first round. So whether you think those people were crazy or not, it's a decent match because people were connecting it all the way through the pre-draft process. And they did it, a round lower than people were predicting that to happen in. So I don't think you can fault the first 3 picks. And from 4 onwards, it's not bad either.
So let me just hit on the third rounder, Neville Gallimore, one of my favorite players in the draft to watch because the dude's first step is incredible. He ran a 4.79 as a 300 pounder at the combine, and he plays like it. But he also plays with little awareness. But I love it. He just gets off the snap and tries to figure out what he's got to do after that. So disruptive interior player. Reggie Robinson's a project at cornerback. A lot of people liked him, but you get the toolsy, let's see what he is in the 4th round. Mm-hmm. Great. Tyler Biadasz, everybody's going to call him Travis Frederick replacement. They both played at Wisconsin. He's probably not going to be as good as Frederick, who was our all-decade center. However, Biadasz is an outstanding run blocker. 3 straight over the last 3 years, second highest percentage of positively graded throws, positively graded run blocks. Among all interior O linemen. That translates really well. He's got some issues in pass protection that would be similar to Frederick, and Bradley and I could probably be a rotational edge as a 5th rounder. So I think they got a legitimate 5 guys who contribute. Reggie Robinson, we'll see, and then Ben DiNucci, the 7th round quarterback, as a backup potential, right? So love the draft top to bottom. They got a good blend of early contributors, long-term plays, and just good value. It was one of our, I think, 4 A+ draft grades that we put on our website. So that's that. Dallas Cowboys. New York Giants are up next. By the way, there's a theme with the NFC East. I think they all did well. I think they all got better. The worst division in football last year got much, much better this year. An unexciting Giants draft if you just look, it's a tackle, a safety, a tackle. But I just thought they got solid players along the board. Dave Gettleman continues to not trade down, but I think he evaluated well. Andrew Thomas going at 4, our top tackle from Georgia. We love that because we think he's the best blend of run blocking and pass blocking among the tackles. That's the most important thing those guys do. So it made sense at 4, and they got some insurance at tackle in the 3rd with one of our favorite developmental prospects in Matt Peart. And then Xavier McKinney adds a lot of versatility to their secondary in the 2nd round. What do you think of the Giants draft, Sam?
Yeah, I think it was a really good draft. I think it's risky to believe in your ability to identify talent better than other people. That's one of our sort of one of our rules of thumb, one of our shining North Star guiding lights of how you should approach draft process and all that kind of thing. Who's he write for now? The Athletic, Sheil Kapadia, is that a second name? He wrote this piece that was like, here are the commandments that you should use for drafting and for roster building, and that was one of them, right? Don't believe in your own ability to identify talent better than other people, because there's almost nobody for whom that is true. Certainly not enough that it's worthwhile leaning on it versus taking the advantages elsewhere. But honestly, Dave Gettleman might legitimately be one of the best pure talent evaluators in the NFL. And that's why he doesn't ever trade down, because he just goes, no, look, just tell me when we pick, I will pick, because I believe we're picking good players. Now, his strike rate will still not be, 80%. It will still be under 500 more than likely, but it's probably better than other people throughout the NFL. And here, this is another good draft. Andrew Thomas, we were all the way through the process. It was kind of like, the Giants are taking a tackle at 4 and they're going to take the wrong one. They're going to take Mekhi Becton, the Giant, more of a project than any of these other guys. May have higher upside than any of these other guys, but he's more of a project. Whereas actually they went the other way. He took the guy that was the best tackle on the board. Maybe he has a lower ceiling than some of these other guys, but I think that would be a harsh interpretation of it. So they take the right guy. And then Xavier McKinney. I need to check whether that's the hard X or not.
You should.
Huh?
You should check that, yeah.
I should, yeah. He, a lot of people are saying he's Simmons, but without the freaky size and the hype. He had the same kind of role in terms of versatility and covering the slot and playing in the box and playing deep and doing everything. And he was pretty much as good at it. He just doesn't look the same. So he didn't get top 5 hype. And honestly, if you're going to deploy a guy like that in just a conventional NFL role and say you're just a safety or you're just a linebacker, he might be a better pick to do that.
He also ran in the 4.6s. I mean, that's the big difference between Simmons. McKinney's got legitimate slot corner type of footwork, and I think he's got tight end covering ability. I mean, there's a lot that he brings to the table. That means over the last couple of years, they brought in Julian Love from Notre Dame, who's an excellent zone corner in college, converted him to safety last year. You have McKinney, who is a safety who could play a little dime linebacker, can play in the slot. You have Jabril Peppers, who's played all over the place. I love the versatility that they're adding on the back end there. They need players like DeAndre Baker to take a step forward, obviously, and live up to his first-round hype last year. He was a bit of a disappointment, but I think it was fantastic by them adding a McKinney there. And then from an offensive line standpoint, like they should be in the middle tier, right? They should be an average offensive line. Nate Solder has not been great. He's not a complete disaster, but he's been below average, right? But Andrew Thomas stepping in at right tackle could immediately become an upgrade to Mike Remmers, even as a rookie. Kevin Zeitler, Will Hernandez, still may be a question mark at center, but like they're getting there, along the offensive line. So where they picked players, I thought the value was there. The receiving core, we never really got to see them together, but they've got some Darius Slayton deep thread and Golden Tate after the catch and Sterling Shepard in the slot. They've got some skill sets there. The one point I made too on our post-draft show with the wide receivers, again, there'll be some good wide receivers available. They didn't attack that in the draft. We always think you should be adding wide receivers and potential playmakers. I think they could be in the market for some good receivers that, if Deshaun Jackson ends up on the street or whatever it is, they should be in the market for players like that to just add some depth to the receiving core.
I think they like their receiving core. I think there's a reason they didn't go hard after it. They had been saying that when you look at last year and Daniel Jones, when you sort of add up the list of his 6 playmakers, essentially, I don't know they played a single snap together on the field. Yeah. They're all dealing with injuries at various times in the year, and they didn't assemble that cast on the field at the same time. So I think they like what happens if they get all those guys back healthy. The other thing to point out is I think this offensive line, in terms of like constituent pieces, is already better than people think it is. Like, obviously they're moving in the right direction with Andrew Thomas and Matt Parrott to potentially become a pair of bookends down the line and replace Solder and a right tackle. But I think the single biggest thing that the offensive line could do from like last year to this year is Daniel Jones improving the speed at which he processes, right? Because we've talked, and this isn't meant as a knock that, hey, Daniel Jones sucks. We were right. Whatever you think about Daniel Jones, he had one of the 10 longest average times with the ball in his hands. So he stressed his offensive line more than most quarterbacks would. And the fumbles, a lot of the big problem with the fumbling was him holding on to the ball too long, inviting pressure that shouldn't have been there. So Daniel Jones goes from like the bottom third to the top third in that area in 2020, and suddenly the offensive line is immediately catapulted up the rankings because their job is easier. They don't have to pass block for as long. Like that will move the needle as much as Andrew Thomas coming in.
So what you just described is why this is one of our axioms. Why creep back toward average works. It's because if you at least have an average offensive line, then so as long as you're not a disaster, the quarterback's going to own a piece of his pressure rate, and then the receivers will own some of it as well. So you need a quarterback that's willing to get the ball out of his hands quickly, and you also need guys for him to throw to quickly, right? So as long as those pieces are also reasonable, the quarterback speeds up his process a little bit. Just don't be terrible up front. And I think the Giants, I don't think they were terrible last year either. That the fans think they were horrible. They did give up a lot of pressure from the tackle position, but like you said, a lot was on Daniel Jones as well. So
yeah, I mean, the other thing is last year had a collection of some of the worst offensive lines the NFL has ever seen all at the same time.
That's a good point.
So like the Giants didn't have a good offensive line last year, but you like if you want to see what a terrible one looks like, watch the Dolphins, watch the Bengals, watch the Giants. Like the Giants had a long way they could have fallen from last year to be the worst line in the NFL.
And this is the same thing that happens every year. Even there's 25 fan bases that hate their offensive line. Literally 25, maybe 30. There's like the Cowboys feel good about their line every year. That's it. Every other team thinks that theirs is the worst.
Yeah, I mean, in their defense, there are years where the last year's Giants offensive line could have been amongst the worst. It's just last year they weren't even in the ballpark.
All right. So we gave them an A. We thought they did a great job as well. And then an A- draft coming up, the Philadelphia Eagles. And Eagles fans are upset overall. I don't want to completely characterize them as upset. There are many that are upset. There are also many that are reasonable. And there are many that are listening to, I think, the reasoning here at PFF. Sometimes people at PFF draw different conclusions. I think a lot of us came to the same conclusion on this, though. I used the word brilliant for the Jalen Hurts pick in the second round. That might have been a little strong. I don't think I was looking for them to do that, but when I think you go through the list of things that could justify it, I think it's a pretty healthy list going Jalen Hurts in the second. We'll get to that in a minute. Jalen Reagor, the first pick, 21 overall. Part of the reason why Eagles fans are upset with this draft is because they think Justin Jefferson's better, because everybody mocked Justin Jefferson to them at 21. So part of why people get mad at the draft, it all depends on which mock drafts you're reading. Like, we loved Reagor. We were ready to take him in the top 15 because he's right there behind Ruggs, if not with him, as a deep threat. I think it's a fantastic fit for the Eagles. You think he's better than Ruggs?
Yeah.
Steal of the draft?
I wouldn't go that far, but I think it's the right spot for him. I think that's where Reagor should have gone. Eagles fans are never happier than when they're mad at something. And they seem to get more mad at you when you say something is good for them than when you say it's bad. Like, the most angry Eagles fans have ever been at us was when we told them they had the best offensive line in the league shortly before they had obviously the best offensive line in the league. And when we said they had the best receiving core in the NFL, which promptly all got injured and they played like crap. Like, those two dramatically higher than when we said, hey, hold the horses, Carson Wentz isn't an MVP, which also pissed them off. But like, that wasn't even in the same stratosphere as when we told them they actually did have the best in the NFL at something. Look, so we'll get to the Hurts thing because that probably defines how you view this draft. But Jalen Reagor is one of the best receivers in this draft. I think he can be a significantly better NFL player than he was a college player because he suddenly has a viable quarterback throwing him the ball. Yep. He's got incredible speed. He, like Ruggs, is another one of those receivers that he doesn't wait for it to come to him. He goes to get the ball, and he has crazy contested catch and high point skills for a speed type receiver. He's good with the ball in his hands, good yards after the catch. Even if they're not looking to move on from Deshaun Jackson's 34 years old. Like, how long do you think he's still going to be able to run a 4.3? So
I think they have to at this point, though, right?
Whatever. But whether it's contingency, whether it's replacement, whatever it is, Reagor is a smart pick there. I think he's a better receiver than Justin Jefferson. I think he's a better fit for what the Eagles want to do in terms of bringing a skill set that isn't already in the meeting room. So I don't understand how you can look at that pick and be upset by it.
I don't know if Renner put the article out yet, but he did something I always like to do, is look at the themes of the draft. I mean, the theme of the Eagles draft was like, let's get faster. Let's get more athletic, right? part of their draft was also trading for Marquise Goodwin. I mean, they added 4 guys who were capable of running sub 4.4 between Jalen Reagor, John Hightower, Quez Watkins, and Marquise Goodwin through trade. And Deshaun Jackson's already on the team to go with your huge dudes in Alshon Jeffrey and J.J. Arcega-Whiteside. So something's got to give in that receiving core. My guess is that Deshaun Jackson gets pushed out due to age. Wow. Maybe they move on with from Alshon once some of these guys develop as well. But I love it. I love adding speed.
More than one thing has to give. It's going to be interesting to see. So they basically got a stable of slow contested catch guys and a stable of speedsters. The balance of which ones get cut by the time the season rolls around, what the makeup of the final 5 or 6 receivers they keep on the roster is going to be pretty fascinating, because they've got 2 extremes and nothing in the middle.
It will be fascinating. Plus, they've got the 2 tight ends to throw to with Zach Ertz and Dallas Goedert. Plus, we'll get to the Vikings when we get there, but the Eagles have kind of been pushing the limits from a salary cap and a depth standpoint. I think they've done a really nice job of just replenishing a strength with options, right? I think one of the most difficult things to do, especially for fan bases, is to be like, we've relied on this position group for a while. However, they either completely regressed, or they got old, or they became too expensive. And then you have to go into the draft and you just replenish a strength with new talent. It's tough to call their receiving core a strength after what we saw last year, because, none of them played and it was a huge disaster. However, on paper, it's a strength, and they replenished it as well with very specific types. They went in there and they got speed, and they can create big plays, which perfectly complement their big tight ends, or at least one of their big-bodied possession receivers. So I love that as a strategy. Give me all the speed guys. They did a great job.
Right.
Beyond
now
that,
sell me on the Jalen Hurts thing.
I want to wrap it up with Hurts. I just want to touch on the other guys really quick. Davion Taylor's an athletic coverage player, as is Kayvon Wallace. Both guys can cover the slot. I mean, Davion Taylor's a linebacker. He played some walkout linebacker over the slot. Jack Driscoll's a developmental tackle that performed well, much like Matt Peart. You want those guys on your team. Prince Tega Winogo, same thing at Auburn, right? So they've got a potential down the road starting tackle between those 2 guys, and guys that can help on the back end between Wallace and Taylor.
You didn't watch much of the ESPN broadcast, right? Because you were doing the days 2 and 3 video stuff. So, but I added on while I was doing stuff, and tone deaf, I think, is one term that's been thrown out there as to some of the stuff they were throwing up. But they were shooting for human interest, right? And sometimes missed wide right. They basically, whoever was operating the bullet point thing was the Mitchell Trubisky of TV production, and was high and wide a lot of the time. So, bullet points about how lived homeless or mother just died and all these kind of things. Yeah. But one story they pulled out that was kind of interesting was for Prince Tega Winogo, who apparently came over originally, I think, from Nigeria. I might be misremembering that, but came over originally, was basically his plan was to become a basketball player, right? I'm going to be in the NBA. That's how I'm going to make things. Yeah. Ends up obviously in the NFL. Instead, gave up basketball because I think he broke a leg or something. So like basketball was the more dangerous pursuit than football. I just thought that was kind of funny.
Yeah.
Guy's taking up the more safe profession, which is offensive tackle in the NFL.
Yeah, much safer. Save your legs. Yeah, that's great. I mean, look, I like the depth there. Let's get to the Jalen Hurts thing. Yeah. My bullet point list of why I think it pays off. First off, backup quarterbacks can be expensive. You're buying insurance. At the very least, you're buying insurance in the second round with Jalen Hurts. Beyond the insurance play, with the difference between you always say this, Sam, don't just go pick up a Matt Castle off the street. You know what Matt Castle is, right? Mm-hmm. We don't technically know what Jalen Hurts is. There's a percentage chance, 2%, 5%, 10%, 20%. There's a percentage chance that he's awesome, that he's really good. And that either helps you, the Philadelphia Eagles, at some point when he has to play football, or even take over for Carson Wentz. Who knows, under a cost-controlled contract, or he's a guy that you could trade for, at the very least, another second-round pick, or maybe even more. And the Patriots did the same thing with Jimmy Garoppolo. They had intentions of having him take over for Tom Brady. Brady went on the best 5-year stretch, I think, in NFL history. So they didn't need Garoppolo for more than 2 games. But they spent a second-round pick, didn't need him for more than 2 games, got a second-round pick back. That was worthwhile insurance, and they didn't lose a whole lot from a long-term team building standpoint. All of those things are true for Jalen Hurts. Even if he doesn't play a snap, it's insurance and the opportunity to maybe stumble in to another great quarterback. Who knows?
So I think there's a combination of points you're making that I think can win me over. I don't love spending a second round pick on him. If they got Jalen Hurts in the third, I wouldn't have a problem with it at all. I'd say it was smart. I'd be on your guys' side in terms of this is genius. This is exactly what you should be doing. Second round picks are just a little, especially when like 53, are just a little bit too valuable for me to be like, I'm going to take this because the shot to nothing is worth it. But if you couch it in the terms of, look, there is a chance that he becomes significantly better than your personal evaluation of him, right? This is all like framed with the idea that I don't think Jalen Hurts pans out in the NFL. I think the things that he's bad at are fatal flaws to be a quarterback at the next level. So my opinion on it is sort of, I don't think he's going to work out. So I don't think it'll be a good move.
That's fair.
When you frame it around, look, there's a chance I'm wrong. It could be a pretty big one, right? There's a chance I'm wrong and he becomes something way better. That's worth taking a shot on. And secondly, there's also the chance that you can flip him down the line for the same and or better and or slightly, a diminishing return, but you maybe get a third back, right? So you can recoup the second round pick that you spend to check out if it's worth or not. In terms of like, I don't know that you would take just a backup quarterback in the second round, right? If all you were told was, this is your version of Matt Castle, right? There's no more upside. He's never going to be better than that, but you are getting a backup option who you never want starting for you in the second round. That to me is not worth it in the second, even though backup quarterbacks are really valuable and blah, blah, blah.
Agree with that.
So if that's all it is, I don't love the pick, but the way you phrased it, I think is smart in terms of potentially you can flip him for more. And I think it's the gamble that he's better than you think he is worth taking. The second element to this that's probably worth talking about is what if the Eagles use him as more than that, right? This Taysom Hill idea, right? And the idea that he can be a backup quarterback and he can be your insurance and he can sit on the sideline and be contingency for the time where Carson Wentz gets hurt. But you can also bring him in as a Taysom Hill. And whatever people think about Taysom Hill, it works. Like the gimmick offense that they run with Taysom Hill improves their offense overall from a statistical standpoint, EPA, whatever way you want to measure it. This is a better offense when Taysom Hill comes in and runs his gimmick crap. So if they get the same thing out of Jalen Hurts, it's an improvement, right?
Yep. There's all these little benefits that I think add up. I completely agree with you. A backup quarterback in isolation in the second round is too much. Even Jalen Hurts in the second round might be too much. But I like what the potential is there. The one other thing, too, I don't really love him as a player either. Watching him, he holds the ball too long. I think he leaves plays on the field, doesn't turn it over, probably takes too many sacks. I'm describing Tyrod Taylor here, by the way, our comp in the draft guide. Is that okay? You love Tyrod. So my thought with Hurts, even though I don't love a lot of the on-field evaluation stuff, here are the boxes that he ticks. Pure production, hitting open throws, and a lot of the things maybe aided a little bit by the Oklahoma scheme, but he performed well in some advanced numbers. He performed well when our guys did some text analytics, which I think is awesome, right? People think that there's this whole analytics versus scouting debate. Well, what better way to leverage scouting than to actually use their words and figure out what they mean? That's something the Houston Astros, before they cheated, actually did really well in baseball. They took their scouts and they said, hey, go scout, write your scouting reports the same exact way you always do. And then we're going to analyze it and say, hey, these are the words you used about this player. And these are the words you used about this other player. They're the same. Let's see where you're right or wrong. Our text analytics that we used on we used one source, Dane Brugler from The Athletic, 6 years of data, pointed him toward Deshaun Watson. All right. So whatever, it doesn't mean he's Deshaun Watson. Let's just say text analytics favorable. So check mark in advanced analytics, text mark in the text stuff, check marks, check mark in whatever this it factor is, right? Alabama, Oklahoma, good teammate, comes in relief, wins the SEC championship. Offense got better right when he got there at Alabama as a true freshman. Like all of this, intangible, whatever, was all good. Check mark, right? Senior Bowl, showed improvement, check mark. So what I do is all of those things help me talk myself into Jalen Hurts just a little bit because he showed well in all these other areas, which makes me think that quote unquote upside, like this is what upside is. All right. Upside is not 6'6" with a cannon. Upside is, do you check a lot of the boxes that translate at the next level? Right? Do you do things that other guys do that worked at the NFL level? Jalen Hurts does a lot of those things. Therefore, he has upside. It's not because he's 6'6" with a cannon. It's because he's performed well in a lot of key areas. So that gives me hope that second round pick could potentially be valuable for the Eagles.
The whole Tua Jalen Hurts dynamic, by the way, like just how awful were the Alabama quarterbacks before those two arrived? Because Jalen Hurts made a notable immediate improvement to the quarterback spot when he arrived, and then Tua made an automatic, immediate, obvious improvement to the offense when he arrived over Jalen Hurts.
Lay off my man Greg McElroy.
Like, how were they even competing with the quarterbacks that were there before?
That bad. I will say, when Tua took over for Hurts, though, it did look completely different. It was like, wow, this team.
That's what I'm saying. They had like two
on time. It was great.
They had like two notable step changes with quarterback changes, which just, I mean, the guys before that, whether McElroy, who was the most recent one? Stalker?
AJ McCarron.
No,
Jacob Coker. They had Blake Sims. Yeah, Coker wasn't great. Anyway, we've spent a lot of time on this. Plus Jalen Hurts, all that stuff I was talking about as a passer. Plus he adds the running element. No, he's not Lamar Jackson. He's not a dynamic runner. He's a good runner. And if you're going to build an offense with rushing ability, I used like David Garrard would pick up 3 or 4 first downs per game with his legs. And it was like, he's a pretty efficient passer. And then you just steal some first downs. At the very least, Hurts can do stuff like that. So I think there's a lot of value here, potentially.
I mean, he's closer to Carson Wentz than he is Lamar Jackson in terms of rushing ability.
That's a good point. That's a very good point. All right. So A- we gave the Eagles. Don't worry, Eagles fans. I know you would have rathered a player that could help right now in the second round, but have a little bit of long-term vision. This could really pay off. It might not, but it could. I think it's a worthwhile bet is what it comes down to. The Washington Redskins. They start out, we gave them a B overall. We think it was solid. They didn't have a second round pick. What's that?
They fall into the category if you took a running back, so the maximum you can get is a B in the
PFF. There's a cap. Even a running back that George liked, right? Because you can call him a wide receiver and Antonio Gibson from Memphis, but they moved him to running back. That dropped you a letter grade. Chase Young at number 2. I mean, part of this evaluation too is like, what did you do with what you were given? To whom much is given, much is expected, Sam. A biblical principle. And the Redskins were given the number 2 pick. What did they do with it? Probably the expectation, right? They called Chase Young. That was the expected right there.
I'm fine with that as a concept. I just look, when you not screwing up the opportunity to make a mess of it, I think is the significant thing that should not be undervalued in the NFL, right? Last year, the Arizona Cardinals took Kyler Murray at number 1 when they could have taken a conservative approach and said, no, we took a first round quarterback a year ago. It's unfair to him. It's unfair to us to bail now, even though we believe that even just in our abstract terms, Kyler Murray is a much higher graded prospect than Josh Rosen was. They deserve significant credit for just not screwing that up because it was easy to do that. The Redskins taking Chase Young at 2, the Bengals taking Joe Burrow at 1. You have to give those teams credit for not figuring out a way to screw that up. And, the analytics guys, George and Eric in particular, their big criticism with this is trade down, right? I don't know that there was an option for the Redskins to trade down without taking a deal that would have been so insulting to them in terms of value. It's not worth it. So
they have another angle, though. They have another angle, though, too. And I heard them mention this on the forecast. You guys should check it out because those guys, at the very least, get you thinking. Okay. And they got me thinking about this, too, right? We've talked about should you have taken Tua?
Do it.
So, but here's the way they couched it. Like, I always couch it as you got to find the guy, not a guy. I think Haskins was worth seeing if he's the guy last year, but there's still questions if he's the guy, so get another guy. They couched it as, what's going to change the calculus in the NFC East? What's going to actually move the needle? And then when you look back at what the NFC East did in this draft, Cowboys got better with one of the best drafts. The Eagles, we think, got better with one of the best drafts. The Giants had one of the best drafts. And the Eagles and Cowboys are already sitting there with 2 quarterbacks that are smack dab in the top 15 of the NFL, potentially the top 10. Dak and Wentz. Daniel Jones might not be a top 15 quarterback, but he's certainly got the potential to put together big years because of his aggressiveness. The only way that Washington competes with them is if they upgrade a quarterback. Now, upgrading a quarterback either means Dwayne Haskins takes a big step forward this year, or they get another guy to compete. And the point of, if you take Tua, okay, you just increase your odds that you've improved your quarterback position. It could still be Haskins, but it certainly could be Tua as well. That's the point there. It's moving the needle within your division. Where Chase Young, like, that's great, but honestly, if Haskins doesn't develop, Chase, like, they're the fourth best team in that division. If Haskins really does develop, okay, maybe they're competing for 2 or 3, but Chase Young doesn't move the needle like Tua potentially could for this team.
I agree that Chase Young doesn't matter until they have a quarterback that catapults them into a contending spot. But I believe that chasing a franchise quarterback is a sequential, not a parallel develop. I don't think you can do it in parallel. I think you can only do it sequentially. So you get Dwayne Haskins. You try and figure out if Dwayne Haskins is the guy only at the point. So Dwayne Haskins becoming the guy ceases to become an option at the point where you draft somebody else to try and do that. The second you draft Tua, Dwayne Haskins is no longer the guy. Just as the second the Arizona Cardinals drafted Kyler Murray, Josh Rosen ceased to be the guy. It doesn't work in parallel. You can't just assemble 3 of those guys and figure out which one of them emerges as the cream of the crop and he's your guy. The second you draft one, the first guy is on the way out the door. And even if you tried to keep them both in the building, I don't think it would function. The team needs he needs one guy. They need one guy to focus on. You can't go, well, one of these 2 guys is probably going to emerge as the better one, and we'll see how that works. And I don't think it's even an NFL specific thing. That doesn't even function in business. Like, we're going to put both these guys on equal footing and we'll just see which one's better. Like, you have to point to a certain person and say, this is the person. Dwayne Haskins, for the moment, is the quarterback of the Washington Redskins. He showed enough last year that I think you can say, all right, we're confident that he can be somebody. We're going to build around him and we're going to give him the Denver Broncos-esque chance to succeed or fail and try and help him as much as possible. If that doesn't work, then we're back to the drawing board and we're in the Justin Fields, Trevor Lawrence sweepstakes. But I do not think that saying, all right, we're not certain he's the guy, so we're going to take Tua 2 and have 2 guys we're not certain of the guy. I don't think that helps.
All right, that's fine. Slightly agree to disagree. I also would probably take Chase Young if I couldn't trade down in their situation anyway. So I get it. Beyond that, Antonio Gibson, running back, wide receiver hybrid, a playmaker. Still would have liked to see like a really pure wide receiver maybe there. They did get Antonio Gandy Golden. He is the definition of upside because
like that.
He has a couple Calvin Johnson plays on tape, and Sadiq Charles, another one of those quote unquote developmental offensive tackles who might actually have to step in and play sooner rather than later. You like Gandy Golden though in the 4th?
Well, if it wasn't for Denzel Mims at the Senior Bowl this year, Gandy Golden would have been the guy that the Senior Bowl pushed forward in terms of a dominant week that everyone was talking about, because, like the guy that distanced himself Terry McLaurin style at the Senior Bowl. His grade was really good for us during the one-on-one drills, second only to Denzel Mims. Again, like, he's got some freaky athleticism skills to him as well. So he ticks all those boxes in terms of a guy that could be significantly better based on what we saw against elevated competition. I do like that. Just the Haskins Tua thing, right? Do you genuinely think that if you stuck both those guys in the room, tried to roll with both of them for the next year, you don't see any downside whatsoever to just the shitstorm from the media that brings down upon your team for the next 12 months? Like, the idea that anybody in that building is going to be answering questions on is which guy is the guy.
I think what it takes is proper messaging, right? Because, like, part of the reason why Eagles fans were telling me, part of the reason why they were upset is because the message they sent this offseason is they're going to build around.
Right.
Well, no, it's because they said they're going to build around Carson Wentz. My first day as general manager, I would set the tone. I would take a lot of the theories I've talked about here and kind of lay them out and say, look, we're going to look for the quarterback. And if you want to play quarterback for me, you might need to have thick skin, and not like in a Gruden, like, I'm going to pull you on the next play standpoint.
Right.
But like, we're literally
we're
going to crowd the room with 5 dudes and figure out what happens. Right.
So let's say you're week 2.
Play the groundwork.
Let's say you're week 2. Week 2, Haskins played badly week 1. he's at halftime week 2. It's not going well. So when's Tua coming in? When
I
are you
think
starting Tua?
I think you need a longer term plan. Tua's not playing until he's ready, right?
Well,
Haskins. So you have a longer term plan. It's not like on a whim, like I'm going to pull you when you have a bad interception. You have to have a long term
no. I'm not
vision
saying
for this thing.
but that's the question. That's all you're going to hear for every step of the way. Anytime.
Here's what I think that is. I think that's the equivalent to there's a difference between running back skill level and then the production that they are going to give you, right? So you can have a guy with a ton of skill and he only gets a little bit more production, right? That is answering questions. Like the byproduct of having 2 quarterbacks is uncomfortable and all that stuff. But I think the negatives there are so insignificant compared to what the payout would be, right? If I had to suck it up and deal with questions for a year about Tua versus Haskins, I'll suck it up for a year if I know I'm going to find the guy. If I think it increases my chances of finding the guy, right?
I don't know if there's anything in the NFL teams hate more than the concept of distractions.
But I don't think it matters what you hate, right? So, but we talk about defensive linemen all the time, like in offensive linemen. We think if we impose our will, you're going to quit in the 4th quarter. Like that's their feeling, right? And because it happened a couple times in high school and dudes quit. But it probably doesn't actually happen in the NFL more than like once every 3 years. You know what I mean? Like those are feelings that we think we have, that we think have adverse effects that probably don't. And even if they do, they're minimal compared to the payout at the end, which is like you get your guy, you get your quarterback. I could have, like, if you have a great quarterback, a very good quarterback versus an average quarterback, you could have 4 positions that are worse on your team and still be better. You know what I mean? Like your roster could be 4 positions worse with a better quarterback and be a better team. You know what I'm saying?
But the difference. So if you like the offensive guy, the coach whose feeling is that imposing your will, blah, blah, blah. If you don't listen to that guy, there's no downside, right? It's, I'm not doing that. I'm giving you this other player instead. Make that work. All right, done. The feeling that everybody in that building hates dealing with distractions. The negative to that is if you ignore them and say, screw it, we're doing it anyway, because the payoff is from one of these quarterbacks becoming the guy is better than you being annoyed. You now have the entire organization pissed off that all they have to do is answer questions about Tua or Haskins. And that, like, I don't know what the consequences are to that, but I'm going to guess that all 53 people, plus the coaching staff, plus everybody who gets on record from the front office, all of those guys being annoyed and irritated for 12 months is not a positive one for your football team.
Might not be, but I think as GM, I'd have to set the tone, declare the message. I'll get my 90 guys and say, hey, this is how we're going to build the team. Right?
You'd be fired in 9 months.
That's fine. They pay me for the next 3 years. I am all for it. Listen, a lot of NFL teams listen to us, so I don't want to make this pitch. But look, if I give it a shot and get paid a ton and get fired after a year or two, like, I'll be all right. Come back to the podcast. I have a long-term plan, so you got to sign me to a 6-year contract. Because my long-term vision, like if you're not on board and you can't handle a couple media questions where you just say, ask our GM, I'll tell them, ask our GM. That's what they. I think a lot
of your ideas have a lot of merit and make some sense, particularly some of the longer-term strategy ones. But I think quarterback is one of those spots that breaks rules and has exceptions in certain circumstances. Look at the trade, right? It's like trading up is always a bad idea unless it's for a quarterback, in which case the value is so good it changes things. I think quarterback, it changes that dynamic in terms of they only function in sequence. They just don't function parallel. The second you have 2 quarterbacks and it's a competition, it's a giant pain in the ass. And you only do that when you know you don't have a quarterback yet. I think when you have a young guy, you roll with this guy until you're certain he isn't the guy, and then you reload and you swing again.
So that's the one point that I could get behind, is that, like, if you're bad, you do have other opportunities to get quarterbacks. Like, I could get behind that. Like the Redskins, there's a pretty good chance that they're picking in the top 10 next year. And
you're going to have an equivalent to
Fields. Yeah, I understand.
You're going to have an equivalent to a next year. You're not going to have an equivalent Chase Young next year.
But the other part is, if you're that fringe team, you're going to be a get you on the green type of GM if you had the opportunity. And so you're Mariota and I'm Winston, right? You might make the playoffs a couple times, but you've got no chance of winning. I might have a couple 4-win seasons, but I'm going to win a championship. That's what I think.
You're not going to last long enough in the job that you win a championship.
You want to get rid of me and get back to more great PFF YouTube content? All you have to do is push that button right there and subscribe. Thanks for watching.